So today we're going to be learning about how successful was Kaiser Wilhelm II in achieving a policy called Weltpolitik. So if you remember last lesson, we were learning about the main problems that Kaiser Wilhelm had in governing Germany, and there's just a few key points there to remind you of some of those main problems. Things like the growing population in Germany, the fact that Germany was in debt of 489 billion before the First World War, the rise of socialism, the influence of the Prussian military generals, the growth of parliamentary government. All of these different things meant that Kaiser Wilhelm had quite a few problems in governing Germany. So we're going to look at Weltpolitik today, which is all about the foreign policy of Kaiser Wilhelm. So the key question is about how successful was Kaiser Wilhelm in achieving this policy of Weltpolitik. So by the end of this lesson, with the resources and the information on this presentation, you are going to be able to understand how successfully Kaiser Wilhelm II achieved this aim of Weltpolitik, with a particular focus on the navy laws. And this was really important aspect of Weltpolitik in terms of expanding the German navy. So what I'd like you to do first of all is just look at these different pictures and just write down your own definition of what you think is meant by Weltpolitik. So you can see a range of different pictures there, some pictures of navy ships. You can see a map there as well, which shows you the expansion of Germany during this time in the German Empire. One of the key things that Germany was looking for during this time was what was called a place in the sun. It really wanted to rival countries like Britain and France in terms of having a large empire during this time. So you can pause the video, and you can write down your own definition of what you think might be meant by Weltpolitik. Okay, so here is a definition of Weltpolitik. So if you just have a look at this idea, there was a cartoon there on the right hand side that was produced about Kaiser Wilhelm II, showing him wanting to take over the world, if you like. So Weltpolitik literally translates as world politics, and it's the imperialist. Imperialist means to do with empire, so about expanding an empire. And the aim of Kaiser Wilhelm II was to transform Germany into a truly global power. Now, we looked in some of the previous lessons about Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck was the Chancellor, nicknamed the Iron Chancellor, that kind of effectively really ruled Germany from 1871 to 1890. Key person in the unification of Germany. Now, he was dismissed by Kaiser Wilhelm II in 1890, and this was really seen as the start of Weltpolitik. Bismarck didn't want to pursue an expansionist foreign policy. Kaiser Wilhelm did, and therefore that's why Bismarck had to go, and Kaiser Wilhelm II takes an increasingly dominant control and power over German foreign policy during this time. So one of the key things to be aware of when you're thinking about Kaiser Wilhelm II is about the influence of the Prussian generals. Now we know that Prussia was a key part, really, was a very dominant aspect of Germany. It was really Prussia that had kind of taken control of the rest of the Germanic states. Now many of the Kaiser's key advisors were members of the Prussian military, or the so-called Prussian Junkers, who were the landowners, and they hugely influenced the policy of Weltpolitik. And it was one of the challenges the Kaiser had, to kind of keep the influence of the Prussian generals and the Prussian Junkers happy during his rule. So German Foreign Secretary Prince Bernhard von Bulow once said that, in one word, we wish to throw no one in the shade, but we demand our own place in the sun. And you can see there some pictures of some navy boats. This is very much what Germany wanted to achieve during this time. It wanted to rival the power of Britain and France during this time period. So Kaiser Wilhelm had this unique fascination about the navy. Remember, Kaiser Wilhelm was the eldest grandchild of Queen Victoria, so he spent a lot of time in England, spent time on the south coast in places like Portsmouth, and this is what he said about the English navy, and he really admired the English navy, and he wanted to have something similar for Germany. And of course, this passion of Kaiser Wilhelm to expand the German navy effectively means that Germany enters what's called a naval arms race in the early 20th century with Britain, and this has the effect of creating tension between England and Germany, or Britain and Germany during that time, and really has an important cause or factor really of the First World War. So the Kaiser's policies here were very much an important contributory factor to the outbreak of the First World War. So between 1898 and 1912, Germany introduced a series of naval laws. The Kaiser appointed a man called Admiral von Tirpitz to head up the navy in 1897. And these series of naval laws led to the German Navy increasing in size. We'll look at a little bit more about that in more detail in just a moment. But if you have a look at that statistic, that's an absolutely stark statistic. 24% of Germany's annual spending was on the Navy by the end, just before the First World War. So that just shows you how much money is being spent. And of course, this creates quite a lot of opposition in Germany. We talked about the rise of socialism, the rise of the Social Democratic Party. They're very much against all of this money being spent on the Navy when there's a fair bit of poverty in some of those German cities, for example, low wages, long working hours, poor living and working conditions. So that creates quite a few tensions really during this time around the naval laws. So you can see here we have a different number of naval laws. The information sheet that you're going to have talks about how the naval laws expand the Navy, but we can just see how much the different naval laws increase the size of the Navy during this time. So as I said before, there's just a picture there of von Tirpitz, who's Secretary of State for the Navy, and von Bulow on the right-hand side, who's the Foreign Minister. These are some key appointments that the Kaiser makes during this time, and a key aspect of achieving his Weltpolitik. So this is a little bit of information. You might want to pause this here and just write down some ideas for this. This is how the naval laws affected Germany. So there were both positive and negative effects of the naval laws on Germany during this time. So they definitely encouraged patriotism and nationalism, but very, very expensive. They also did create quite a few new jobs, so that was an important consequence. But I think one of the key things of the naval laws is it definitely contributed to Germany being in debt before the First World War. And the First World War only exacerbated those economic problems that Germany faced, and was one of the reasons really why Germany is in such a poor state economically after the First World War. And we'll obviously learn about that in future lessons, but things like the hyperinflation crisis, very much have their roots in that massive spending that Germany was taking part in even before the First World War. So as part of this Weltpolitik, there's new international agreements that are made, and basically what happens is that Europe divides into two armed camps just before the First World War. So Great Britain and France signed the Entente Cordiale in 1904, which basically means friendly understanding, and then Russia joins that in 1907 to create an alliance called the Triple Entente. And Germany has a very strong alliance with Austria-Hungary, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So basically there's your two armed camps really for the First World War. So this shift in policy from a much more defensive and diplomatic policy under Bismarck to a much more aggressive foreign policy under the Kaiser with the Weltpolitik is a key aspect for the tensions that we have before the First World War, and a real direct cause of World War I. This just shows you a picture of the German Empire in 1913, so it's worth just learning some of these different names. So these are some of the different places that become part of the German Empire. Nowhere near as big as what Britain and France have achieved, but this is, what it looks like, that the actual place in the sun that Germany is hoping to create during this time. So if you have a look at this source, this just tells you a little bit about some of the tension within Britain towards the Kaiser. There's quite a lot of evidence there about their attitude towards the Kaiser and what they think about the Kaiser, and you can just see some of the ideas here. He's got a military style hat. He's grabbing to take control of Europe during this time. This sinister shadow as well. So the Kaiser is being portrayed here as being quite a kind of like sinister character trying to grab control of Europe during this time. So this shows you the tension and sort of mistrust that people in Britain had. So we can see here, this is a nice quote from Sir Edward Grey, who's Britain's Foreign Secretary, and you can see here, and you can read this, perhaps you can pause it and just kind of see the sort of mistrust and intention and concern really from Britain that this could all lead to a war. So that concludes our lesson on how successful was Kaiser Wilhelm in achieving Weltpolitik. There's a little timeline of information there, some of the key things we've learned about. So you can pause that and have a look at that, and obviously let me know if you've got any questions. Thank you very much.